Welcome to the third installment in the Smoke and Gun series, Bare Metal to Clear Coat, featuring custom painter Ed Hubs.
What we're going to do right now is just walk you through and show you all the areas that we're going to repair and how we're going to do that. Let's get started right here and I'll show you what we got going up in this cowl area. This is a fixed cowl, so we can't take it off, so we're going to have to strip around it. We've already chemically stripped around this area here, but now we're going to pull out the windshield wipers and we're going to go ahead and wire wheel back inside this. Same with all the edges here. Make sure these are nice and clean. Rusty areas like this right here need to be sandblasted. We'll sandblast this whole area, clean out the seam sealer. I like to remove the factory seam sealer, sandblast that area, make sure none of the rust creeps out from underneath this. We're going to go down into this area, do the same thing. Come back through here, clean out all the seam sealer, and then we're going to chemically strip, just the same as what we already did on the outside of the car. We'll show you step by step on that. We use aircraft stripper for that. What Doug's doing right now is using a recovery system made by Blue Point. You can buy this from your local Snap-on dealer. What he's doing is going in and removing every bit of rust so all the pits are taken out. We're using on the door jamb right here is aircraft stripper. Cheyenne's already poured it into this container. There is no mixing ratio on it. You pour it straight in and you go for it. Now he's wearing protective gloves, respirator, and he'll have goggles on. You need to wear all these items. This is very toxic. What he's going to do is apply it onto the jamb here. You spread it in one motion. This is what you want. Let it set for about 15 minutes. Sometimes you can put plastic over top of it to let it cover. And then you want to take a putty knife and scrape all this off. What Cheyenne's doing right now is scraping the excess paint stripper off. You can see there's multi-layers on here. There's about 7 layers of paint on this particular car. What he's going to do is scrape off everything, go back in with this little wire brush, clean that up. Then from that point, we're going to take lacquer thinner on a rag and wipe the area off. The reason we do that is so none of the chemical will flip back into your face and cause you harm. So now he's going to take what's called a crud thug. It's a wire wheel. It's made by Snap-on. He's going to go back in and we're going to clean this area up. We'll show you real close up here. what I'm doing right here is I'm going to shave out the marker light on the side of this quarter panel. What we've already done is we've cut out a piece of metal the same thickness as the metal that's on this car. And I've cut this panel just a little bit smaller than what the opening of this hole is. And what we got going here is this is called stitch welding. What you don't want to do is weld a long area at one time. That'll warp your quarter panel. You can weld like an inch at a time and go from one area to the next area to the next area. Just keep going around the entire panel until you have it completely filled in. Once that's done, grind that area off, fill that back in with body filler. After stitch welding, what you need to do is go back in with a wet rag and it cools down the surface. The reason you do that is so the panels do not warp. As you can see, he's going back and forth across it, keeping it nice and cool. When you're restoring a car, the reason I take out body filler is this is a prime reason why. This had filler over top of it, and it's still got a busted seam right here where the weld is split open. They did not fill that, they did not weld it. If you just left the filler in there, you wouldn't know that. So that's why we grind it all to bare metal. We're going to sandblast all this, grind this out, and re-weld this entire seam. These black areas right here that I'm showing you, that's rust, or as some people call it, cancer. This has to be removed. What we do is we take a sandblaster, we blast this entire area, and we make sure that every single pit of rust is out. If you do not do that, when you put body filler back over it, it's going to come back, and it's going to come through your filler and through your paint job. We've already removed the doors and the fenders and the hood. I have a fender up here that I'm going to show you exactly what to do on it. This area here has been really damaged. I'm going to show you how to use metal files, body filler, hammers and dollies. I'm going to show you how to create a style line that is not there. This style line right here has been damaged so bad that we're going to have to fill this back in and create another style line. I'm going to show you how to make that perfectly straight. When you're restoring an old car, you're going to find a lot of areas like this right here. This has previous body work done to it. The way they did it before is they drilled holes to pull the dent out and stuffed them full of body filler. You cannot do that. These need to be taken out, ground back out, sandblasted, and welded in. Once this is all done, we're going to do the same as what I just showed you on the fender. Create another style line, because this style line goes like this. I'm going to show you how to shave it, fill it in, and block it correctly.
Metal refinishing.
What Doug is doing right here is using a hammer and dolly. This here is called a dolly, and there's a lot of different sizes to fit the contours of the metal. What he does is using your hammer, you'll stick the dolly on the back side and hammer it down flat to make the surface come straight. Now from that point, we're going to use what's called a metal file. And what he's going to do is he's going to go back across the top here to take the top edges down. And we'll show you a little closer view of that. Doug's doing right now is he's taking his hand and going back and forth across it. What that does is it lets you know how straight this panel is and to know if you have to go back and forth and hammer dolly a little bit more.
Using a hammer and dolly allows you to shape the metal into its original contour. By using your hand to feel the metal, it will tell you where your high and low spots are. Doug and Cheyenne are now removing the marker lights. Doug is using a cutoff grinder to remove the metal flange that holds the marker light in. You want to make the backside as smooth as possible. That way it will look like the fender has never been touched. Now Cheyenne is using a tool called a nibbler to cut out a patch panel. The easiest way to make a pattern for your patch panel is to lay a piece of cardboard over the hole and trace it out. Using a pair of scissors, cut the template to the exact size. Always wear the correct safety gear. Goggles and gloves are a must for your own protection. Metal shrinking. What Doug and Cheyenne are doing right now is called shrinking the metal. Using a torch, slowly heat up the metal and then apply a damp rag with water onto the surface. What this does is tighten up the metal. This is the process that you do when the metal is stretched. What Doug is doing now is using a slap file with a dolly on the backside. The reason we're doing this is to keep the metal from buckling in and out, causing an oil can effect. You may have to repeat the process several times. You can see by looking down the style line that there's a low spot in the fender. This area will need to be shrunk a little more. Using a chisel face shrinking hammer, work the style line using a dolly on the backside. You could switch up and hammer from the backside and use the dolly on the top side if needed. Before using body filler, make sure the surface is clean. Sometimes using a wire wheel to get into every crevice is necessary. Applying body filler. The guys are now mixing polyester body filler. They use Rage Gold. It has excellent flow and leveling characteristics. Also, it's base coat stain resistant. The mixing ratio is to add a ribbon of cream hardener from edge to edge across the center of a 4-inch diameter puddle of filler, about 2% by weight. Puddles larger than 4 inches in diameter will require additional hardener. When spreading the filler, make sure that you spread all of the air bubbles out. That will minimize pinholes in your body filler. The smoother you spread the body filler, the less sanding you will have to do later. Make sure the surface is clean before spreading the filler. Wipe down the metal with grease and wax remover before spreading the filler. You'll have to spread the filler a couple of times, making sure that you sand in between coats of filler. Sand the first time with 36 grit sandpaper and rough in the first layer. Make sure you blow off the surface and clean it before applying more filler. Block sanding. Using a tool called a cheese grater, go over the filler using very little pressure. Pull the cheese grater in one direction. What this does is shave off the high spots and saves a lot of time sanding. All the cheese grater is doing is shaving the high spots off. Be very careful when you are doing this process. The cheese grater can be a very valuable tool, but if you apply too much pressure, it'll gouge the filler and make a lot more work. Custom Shop has come out with a new line of sanding blocks. They come in 9, 16, 24, and 32-inch sizes to meet all of your needs. Using two hands, sand at an angle. When you're sanding the body filler and you start seeing metal exposed, this means that there's a high spot. You will need to use a pick hammer and dolly, gently working the metal down as to not damage the body filler area before applying your next layer of filler. The darker spots in the filler are low spots. Keep sanding until it's one even color. Once all of the bodywork is straight, it's time to primer. Apply in the primer. Start by blowing off the car, making sure that you blow every vent hole out. The guys have blown the car off 2 times prior to putting it in the booth. Once the vehicle has been blown off, use grease and wax remover and spray on a light coat. Use a lint-free rag to wipe the surface off. Make sure not to saturate the filler. Always make sure that you change rags if they get dirty. Keep changing to a clean one. Always use a respirator when doing this process and rubber gloves so that you do not contaminate the surface with the oils in your hands. Ed is mixing up the primer now using 2K ISO-free primer. The mixing ratio is 3 parts KFP primer to 1 part KFP 306 hardener as a high build primer. What Ed and Cheyenne use to spray the primer are Sada NR 2000 gravity feed guns with a 1.4 fluid tip and needle combination. 2K primer is a direct-to-metal primer. It has excellent corrosion resistance and adhesion when applied over properly prepared steel, galvanized aluminum, and fiberglass. 2K iso-free primer is easy to sand and top coat with all current base coats. Apply 4 coats of primer, allowing each coat to dry 15 to 20 minutes between each coat. Only mix as much primer as you need, because you only have a 2-hour window before the primer will start to harden. There's no thinning required. Block sanding the primer. The guys have waited until the next day to start the block sanding process, allowing the primer to cure. Start out blocking with 150 grit sandpaper. It's always good to have your shop dog there to supervise. At least Gunnar thinks so. And yes, he does prefer green 3M tape over the tan color for some reason. You should always block sand at an angle. The longer the strokes, the flatter the panel. As you're block sanding, your paper may clog up on you. You can either blow it off or use a piece of Scotch-Brite to wipe it off, getting you prolonged use of the paper. When you're trying to block sand in the corners, use a round block. Now the hard part begins. Using Custom Shop's 24 and 32-inch blocks, the guys start in on the roof. You have to be careful not to push too hard on the roof and buckle it. You still need to apply pressure to sand it, but not so much that you damage the roof. Always wear a dust mask for your own protection when sanding. What Cheyenne is doing now with the tape is making sure the style line is straight. He'll sand the primer up to the line and then reverse the step onto the other side of the line. After removing the tape, you can see how straight the line is. Using the tape is a good guideline. Here's another place to use the round block on a concave panel. As you can see, Cheyenne is pointing to a low spot. They've sprayed a black guide coat on the car before sanding. The reason for a guide coat is when you're sanding the surface, the black will show in the scratches, allowing you to see that there are low spots or scratches that need to be fixed. A little more sanding and the low spot will go away. While block sanding, you may sand through the primer, exposing the body filler like Ed is pointing to. Don't worry, this is all part of the process. Keep blocking until the panel is flat, because you're going to apply 4 more coats of primer and repeat the same process all over again using a finer grit sandpaper.
What Mac has just done right here, he just sprayed the entire surface down with grease and wax remover, KW901 by Custom Shop. He's put a nice wet coat over the entire surface. Now he's using a lint-free cloth. He's going back in, he's going to wipe it completely clean. What that'll do is get the entire surface ready for a sealer. Here we are in the final stages of prepping. As you can see, I've already sanded the whole entire engine compartment and painted it what's called fastback blue. Custom Shop has specially designed this color just for this car. You can purchase this color off of customshop.com. Let's get back to masking.
Masking the vehicle for paint. To make sure there's no overspray, mask all of the paper to the floor. It's added insurance that there will be no dirt blowing out from under the vehicle and landing in your paint. Mac is taking the 2-inch tape and applying it to the back side of the door jamb, doing what's called backmasking. The guys do this so there are no tape lines on the outside of the panel. The reason that the guys use white paper is because it gives a good reflection and you can see the coverage better in hard to see areas. Using a razor blade, trim the excess paper. It's a good idea to go back over the front edge of the tape with another 2-inch piece.
Do a quick recap where we're at up to this point. When this car arrived to us, it had an existing paint job on it. We used paint stripper and several different sanding devices to strip it down to bare metal. From that point, we've disassembled the entire car, did all the metal refinishing on it, then we put 4 coats of primer on it. After the primer set for a couple days, we blocked it down with 150 grit sandpaper, reassembled the car, make sure all the body lines fit, then we put 4 more coats of primer on it. From that point, we disassembled it one more time, blocked it out with 320 grit, then we went back over the entire car and hand sanded everything. We went back in and seam sealed it, and here we are at this point. From this point here, we're going to go back in, do our sealer on it, get some base on it. Let's get it going. What we're doing right now is using a tack cloth. Make sure you thoroughly tack the entire surface off. Just lightly go over it, don't press hard.
Mixing and spraying the sealer.
We're ready to start mixing up our sealer. We're going to use DTM epoxy primer sealer. Now this can be mixed 2 different ways. It can be mixed as a primer surfacer or as a sealer. Mixing it as a primer surfacer, you're going to use 2 parts primer to 1 part hardener. Now we're going to use it as a sealer. And what we're going to do is we're going to mix it up 2 parts sealer, 1 part hardener to 1 part medium reducer. Mac's doing right now is mixing up some sealer. We're going to pour it into our Jet 3000s. We're going to put 1 nice wet coat over the entire surface. We're going to let it set for about a half hour. You want the finish to look like a satin finish before you go back over with your base coat. We're going to spray our sealer at 27 psi.
Make sure that you do a 75% overlap when spraying. Mixing and spraying the base coat.
Ready to start doing our base coat. Base coat's mixed 2 to 1. We're going to use a medium reducer. It's about 70 degrees right now. We've let our sealer dry for about a half hour now. It's got a nice satin finish. This is what you want it to look like. We've got our base coat mixed up. We're going to start spraying. Make sure you start spraying the same pressure, 27 psi, even with your base coat.
You'll want to spray your first coat of base fairly wet, making sure to overlap 75% for good coverage. Now that's good timing. Mixing and spraying the clear coat.
We got all our base coat done now. We've already put our fenders on and our hood on and the trunk on, and we've made sure we put 2 more passes back and forth across everything to make sure we have a uniform color. I'm going back over and tacking everything off right now and make sure there's no dirt nibs. We're going to mix our clear up here in a minute, get clearing. Ready to mix our clear coat up. We're going to use KC 210 urethane clear with KH 212 overall hardener. We're going to mix 4 parts clear to 1 part hardener. We're going to put on a nice wet coat on the first coat. We're going to let it set for about 15-20 minutes. From that point, we're going to put on a second coat. We're going to wait about another 15-20 minutes. Then we're going to put our third and final coat on. Let's get to mixing our clear.
If you ever have questions about any of the products used in this video, make sure to visit customshop.com. Always make sure to strain all of your paints. The guys are using Sada Jet 3000 RPs at 30 psi with a 1.3 fluid tip and needle combination for clearing. You don't need two guys to paint and clear, but it sure is nice on big projects. As you can see, Ed and Mac both have been spraying together for years and have a good system down. Taking it outside. Well, here we are, outside the next day. The color shows its amazing sparkle and depth. Ed and the staff at Full Blown Customs are proud users of all Custom Shop products and can't say enough about the quality of paint that Custom Shop is turning out and how user-friendly their products are.